Alrighty, so the second boss of Everbloom is definitely a boss that's been giving a lot of players a lot of problems. And while it has recently been nerfed, and we're going to talk about the nerfs specifically and what they do, the fight is still one that is problematic, particularly for pugs. Typically, I would say fights that have a lot of interrupts overwhelm pugs in a lot of ways. If you think about the second boss of Upper Karazhan, Medivh, that was also a fight that overwhelmed pugs unless you had like a prot paladin, in which that case it made it trivial. Where this season, Ancient Protectors is kind of that boss where it's easily able to overwhelm pugs, and we're going to talk about today how to be able to do Ancient Protectors and just some tips that and some tech that we have to make it easier. But on top of that, just generally how you should be structuring the fight, because I see a lot of people kind of mess up how you want to be engaging this encounter. First off, let's talk about the nerfs. So on the most recent reset, Ancient Protectors, Dulu, who is the main big guy who's got more HP than both of the small caster mobs, had his damage nerfed. There was a major issue where the tank was taking basically way too much damage from the Noxic charge. Blizzard agreed and ended up nerfing him. And so that's actually a pretty big deal for tyrannical weeks, that your tank's survivability is going to increase by a lot. At the end of the day, though, they still need to make sure that they have mitigation up for the Noxic charge. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you should be doing this. And first and foremost, let's talk about the ways that you set up your interrupts. So the special casts are on 20-second cooldowns whenever they cast their ability, and they have a 4-second cast. Or actually, they're on like 18-second cooldowns, and they have a 4-second cast. But so 20-second interrupts can cover them. How we have it set up in our group, so we only have 4 kicks because we're playing with the Disc Priest. Mine is a 60-second lockout. We are going to set it up to where our Havoc Demon Hunter is always going to be kicking Toxic Bloom. Our Augmentation Evoker is always going to be kicking Gola on the Revitalize cast. The Vengeance Demon Hunter and myself are going to be free kicking bolts as we see fit. On top of that, you can throw Silent Sigil on a solo mob to be able to interrupt the bolts as well occasionally. So our Vengeance Demon Hunter is going to be freely throwing bolts. Any additional kicks after that are basically bonus. On top of that, if you're ever going to have a cast go off, make sure it's the Revitalize and not the Toxic Bloom. The Toxic Bloom is going to stun your 5-man group, whereas the Revitalize can be purged off, and while it does suck to heal the boss, again, it can be purged off. Now, that's the way you should set up your interrupts. Now, something that I see a lot of groups do, and they do it incorrectly, is you see right now, Earthshaper Telu for us is at 33%, and it's going into Terrestrial Fury, and you see that Gola is now active. Instinctively, what you want to do is you want to move Dulu on top of Gola, and then you want to be cleaving, right, while this boss is active. That way you can free kick bolts and stuff like that. That's not what you should be doing. Instead, you should be killing off Telu, because the big point of danger of this fight is whenever both of the casters are alive, and killing Telu kind of bugs Gola out. It makes Gola never cast Revitalize, even though Gola can and should be able to cast the ability. It never will, and so that allows you to literally just throw your kicks on CD to be able to free kick the bolts that you see from Gola. So what you want to do is, instead of swapping back and forth between the bosses, you just focus Telu down. This makes the fight much, much, much easier. And as long as you have kicks that are assigned to the Revitalize, you can actually free tank some of the bolts. Now, it's not like a small amount of damage, and you should be popping defensives and stuff like that if you're ranged versus the bolts, or you're like a DPS versus the bolts. But that's what your defensives are here for. Otherwise, you're not really taking that much damage. Now, the Torrential Fury does like some ambient damage, but in general, there's always going to be one Torrential Fury going off, and the major source of damage of this fight is going to end up being those bolts that go out into players. Now, let's talk about some tech that you can do on the boss after we've talked about structurally how you should be looking to do the fight in normal runs or pugs and stuff like that. This first piece of tech, quite useful. I would say that it's usable in pretty much every single run that you're able to do, and it's involving lining the Noxic charge, and that makes it not cast. And so you can see our Vengeance Demon Hunter in our group right here. The Noxus charge is being cast onto him, and he is going to be running around this vine here. It's a lot easier whenever you're playing with like a Vengeance Demon Hunter, like a Prot Warrior, because they have a lot more mobility, but it's definitely doable on all other tanks. And you see right there, he gets around this tree. The Dulu doesn't charge him. We don't get the ground effect at all, and the Noxic charge does not hit him. And so that's actually like a pretty big deal. It saves you a lot of tank damage that you have to heal up. Eventually, tanks have been running out of mitigation on tyrannical weeks. That boss would bully your tank a lot. And so that's a way that you can actually save a lot of boss damage if you perfect this from the tank roll. And honestly, it's pretty easy to implement in your group, because only one player needs to kind of know what they're doing with that. Now, this next tech And you need to type "thank you evade" in the comment section right now. So pause the video and type "thank you evade" in the comment section right now for even showing this tech on stream. And I have to give shout outs before I am even allowed to show this tech. So big shout out to Evade, Terrathal, Greg, Dryny, Dazer, and a big shout out to Kimbote. And so let's talk about what we're going to be seeing on screen here. And it's a way that you're able to get all three of the bosses stacked up at the same time. Now, what you see on screen is Evade actually starts out on Gola. And this is a bit counterintuitive to what we were talking about earlier. And something that's also very important is that Evade taunts Gola. And this is crucial to the strategy. The fact that he's playing a Havoc Demon Hunter is also paramount to this strategy that we're about to see right here in just a couple of seconds. But he taunts Gola and is trying to generate as much threat on this boss as possible. He's waiting for the Torrential Fury cast to finish before then leaving the boss. And where we're going to see him go is quite interesting, as he's taunted the boss. He's re-taunting it again to try to make sure that the boss is going to be on him. He cages this mob to make sure that the Stinger is not going to be combated with him, and he's able to stay as far away from this boss as possible. Now he is demon huntering, as I would describe it, all the way up to the top. He's going to be lining that boss, Earthshaper, or Life Warden Gola, over for a couple of seconds. And now once he is so far away from Gola, you see that Gola will start moving back to the group. What you would hear in comms during this clip is like Greg is telling Evade to come back, that the strategy has worked. And once you see Evade come back, you notice that all three bosses are perfectly stacked. I would probably not do this in a normal run. I think that for high-end groups, this is a strategy that you absolutely can implement in your keys if you have enough group coordination or you really know what you're doing. But in general, this is a strat that is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. And if you mess it up, you're probably going to end up resetting the boss. Or worse, you're going to pull the trash pack. Or worse, you're going to end up like with a Demon Hunter that's not hitting a mob for a while, and it didn't work because you're not Evade, right? Now, I am just showing this strategy off because stacking all three of the bosses and being able to then just kill off one of the casters, and you have all three bosses stacked, that speeds up this boss a ton. It makes it a ton easier. You're able to get a lot more efficient cleave, especially if the tank on top of that is canceling the Noxic charge and just dealing with it that way. That's all. Overall, you don't need to do that stuff that I showed at the very end. The stuff that I showed at the beginning about kicking the mobs and like how you're prioritizing what mob you're killing versus what mob you're not killing. That's the biggest part of this boss and the part that most groups don't understand. And so implementing that actually is going to save you a lot of hassle. But I did also want to show some tips and some tech that you can implement in your keys as well. I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. I'll see you later.